Hello and welcome to Africa Today. I am Mike Okwoche. Now, it is more than half a century since Africa began to free itself from the hold of colonialism. Now, on March the 6th, 1957, Britain's Gold Coast colony evolved into what is now called Ghana, with Kwame Nkrumah becoming the country's first president. Now, Ghana led the movement towards liberation by becoming the first sub-Saharan nation to gain independence. Now, looking back at 1957, the Gold Coast nation is now 57 years, and the theme for this year's celebration is building a better and prosperous Ghana through patriotism and national unity. What is your take on the political and economic situation in the West African nation? You can share your thoughts with us on Twitter at TVC Africa Today or send an email to africatoday@tvcnews.tv. And let's take this report now, and Africa Today will be right back. Thanks for joining us.
In May 1956, Kwame Nkrumah's Gold Coast government issued a white paper containing proposals for the country's independence. The British government stated it would agree to a firm date for independence if a reasonable majority for such a step were obtained in the Gold Coast Legislative Assembly after a general election. That year, the election returned the Convention People's Party to power with 71 of the 104 seats in the Legislative Assembly. Ghana became an independent state on March 6, 1957, when the United Kingdom relinquished its control over the country. After independence, the government under Nkrumah sought to develop Ghana as a modern, semi-industrialized, unitary socialist state. With economic independence as its goal, Nkrumah's government set up industries in almost all regions of the country. Today, most of these industries are dysfunctional, hence the country's huge dependence on imports. From 1966 to 1981, the country underwent continuous periods of political instability. A succession of 4 military coups overthrew 3 elected civilian governments and 1 military government. The country, having gone through the hands of 13 presidents, has undergone some changes about which there are mixed feelings. Some are worried the first president's dream for Ghana may never come to pass. Ghana won the admiration of several countries when it embraced democratic rule in 1992. The country has so far held 6 successful presidential elections. It's named as one of the fastest growing economies in Africa.
The country has been a beacon for democracy and the rule of law in Africa over the past years. There have been the good and also the bad days, but through it all, a majority of Ghanaians believe that the country has everything to be thankful for. Eunice Ejari, TVC News, Accra.
Right, many in Africa and around the world continue to recognize Ghana's long-standing democratic civil rule since 1992, which also witnessed several transitional developments. Now, joining us to discuss Ghana and Africa Today, we have Michael Effiong, editor of Vision International. It's good to have you join us.
Good evening.
You're welcome to Africa Today. We have 2 mics in the studio.
Interesting. Isn't that wonderful?
Yes, certainly. It's wonderful. All right. And then later on the phone, we'll be joining Eunice Ejari, TVC News correspondent from Accra, Ghana. And we'll also be speaking with Barrister Charles Joanna, a lawyer in Ghana as well, on phone when the time comes. Now, Michael, let's start this way.
Yes.
You have lived in Ghana for so many years.
Yes, I have.
You've traveled to many countries of Africa. And after you weren't living in Ghana permanently, you traveled to Ghana not less than about 15 times every year.
Yes, exactly.
But let me ask you, what is so unique about Ghana that's different from any other African country?
I think the warmth, the tranquility. The first time I got to Ghana, I was surprised that it was so quiet, so calm. And
not as noisy as Lagos in Nigeria.
It's not so fast-paced as Lagos, for example. So Ghana give you that air of, come here and rest when you pass the airport. So that was my first feeling, and it has not changed. The country has not been as frenetic as Nigeria is. So that was my first take, and that is a take anybody who lives in Nigeria and lands in Ghana for the first time.
Okay. Now, but as it is now, what's the difference between Ghana you visited the first time and Ghana now?
If it's economy, yes, the city has fallen so badly in the last couple of years.
Okay.
If you do business in Ghana, that will really hurt you, because it means that when you convert your whatever you make there into dollars, you have very little.
Yeah.
So in terms of the economy, it's really biting for people who go there to do business.
Now, how would you assess the policies the government is trying to put in place there?
Well,
When it comes to stability.
yes, in terms of, is it economic stability? Well, the government initially, it wasn't, because they had that the world economic problem, it really affected them, because we had a cushion here. I mean, we have oil. Of course, they've just found oil in Ghana as well. Probably they would have that kind of cushion, but they didn't have that, so there was a free fall. And it's been taking longer than necessary to get back on their feet economically. And that has really had a hit on the cedi. And then you remember that they had their own revaluation of the cedi. It used to be, they had to remove the 3 zeros from the cedi. At a point, it was almost $1 to 2 cedis.
Okay.
But now we're talking of $1 to 300 cedis.
Wow.
So is that bad?
Okay. All right, we'll come back to this. Now, joining us on phone is Eunice Ejare, TVC News Ghana correspondent. Now, Eunice, it's good to have you on Africa Today. Now, taking a look at the 57 years of Ghana, how is the country celebrating? Can you let us know?
Yeah, there have been quite a number of individual celebrations that is organized by individual organizations or some government agencies. Basically, the putting the icing on the cake yesterday, that was Thursday, was the Independence Parade, which everybody looks forward to each year. And so there was an interesting parade. Unfortunately, everything was almost disrupted by a storm that suddenly hit parts of the capital yesterday. But the president was able to make his address as expected, and some of the things he touched on had to do with trying to urge Ghanaians on to be patriotic, and then also trying to find a way to encourage Ghanaians to patronize made in Ghana goods so as to reduce the number of imports that come in. And so we realized that Ghana does more imports than exports. So that puts the strain on the country's on the local currency. So it was one of the issues that were discussed. But of course, after each such address, you would have comments, you would have reactions to them. And one of the notable reactions to this regarding the import and export issue was the fact that there are people who are saying that Ghanaians are not able to patronize made in Ghana goods because they are relatively expensive. People bring things from China, Italy, the US, the UK, and they happen to be
All right, Eunice, let me ask you this. What are the citizens of Ghana saying regarding political situation in the country? Is the country, is it living up to the ideals of the founding fathers?
Well, talking about democracy, yes, we would say democracy and the rule of law does exist in Ghana. So that, I would say, it is working perfectly. The people have, as the days go by, the people have more say in what goes on. Governments, as time goes on, we realize that governments are becoming more and more transparent or more open to public criticism and all that. One of the things that we can also say is that the media has much more freedom than before. For example, we can have there was a repeal of the criminal libel law, for instance, which means that the media is much more free to comment or to be critical of government. So yeah, politically, I would say there is still a sense of polarization where we have most two dominant political parties, the National Democratic Congress and the New Patriotic Party. So there are smaller parties, but yet we can't lose sight of the fact that there still is that polarization. So when it comes to an election, we're looking at the New Patriotic Party or the National Democratic Congress.
Okay, Eunice, how involved are the youths regarding growth and development in the country? How empowered are the youth in Ghana?
The youth seem to have a voice now, as we can see. Now in government, we have more young people in government than before. So the young people being there also speak out for the youth most of the time. And what the government says it's trying to do now is to empower the youth economically. So trying to put in them the spirit of entrepreneurship, such that they would be able to not just get out of school and then be looking for employment, but they would be able to employ themselves and employ others. So basically, it's one of the projects that we look forward to. But yes, the youth do have a voice. There are youth. We have the Ministry of Gender Social Protection, which also takes care of the youth. So,
all right, Eunice. All right, Eunice. Thank you very much. That's too much time can permit us for now. Thank you very much for lending a voice on Africa Today. Now back to you, Mike.
Yes.
How would you? Let me say that Ghana is seen as a model, democratic model for other African countries,
yes,
as the case may be. But what do you think is making Ghana becoming a model that is different from maybe Nigeria or Sierra Leone or Kenya or Mozambique?
I think the key point is the fact that they've been able to, since 1992, the votes have counted in Ghana.
Okay.
I think looking around, Ghana is probably the only country where the opposition had won election. After they win 2 terms, they lose the next election. So it's democracy had gone to a situation where the votes count. And when the votes count, it means the government is accountable. And that makes the government sit up when they're in government, because they know that, if you don't perform well, 4 years, 8 years down the line, you're out. And no matter how popular a government is, I think they just get bored. Ghanaians get bored with any government after 8 years. Because like your correspondent said, there are no middle grounds in Ghanaian politics. Okay. You're either MPP or you're NDC.
All right.
I mean, there's no middle ground. You either fall this way or that way. And the government had kept revolving around these two parties since 1992.
That's a good foundation, maybe. Now, we hear so many investors are going into Ghana,
yes,
more by the day from other African countries. What's responsible for that?
For example, I'll use our personal experience.
Okay.
We went to Ghana in 2003. At that time, we didn't even have a single Nigerian bank in Ghana. We just took a risk. We had our usual problems of infrastructure. The lights were bad and stuff like that. So we decided to explore Ghana. Okay. And I remember the first Nigerian bank that opened shop in Ghana was STB. It was then STB, now UBA. And since then, so many other banks had followed suit. So I believe one of the key, apart from being central, I mean, the other thing that's going for Ghana is the fact that the infrastructure work, especially electricity. If you know the amount of money, even running your office with Gen, powering your office with Gen, you can imagine, if you don't have to do that and you still run your business, you'll go there and do business.
It's okay. Now, events to mark Ghana's 57th independence anniversary celebration included President John Mahama lighting the perpetual flame in remembrance of the country's fallen soldiers. And now, talking about remembrance, a 1-minute silence was observed in the country's Volta region in honor of the late BBC broadcaster, Komla Moore, who died on January the 18th this year. We also feel that as well from here. We'll go on a quick break, and Africa Today will be right back. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us in Africa Today. Now, Ghana exports gold, cocoa, timber, and a few mineral resources. In June 2007, the discovery of major offshore oil reserves was announced and production officially began at the end of 2010. Right. Now, let's talk about oil. You're certainly not into oil and gas, but let's talk about oil. Now, the way Ghanaians are going about their oil is different from the way Nigeria or any other country is going about their oil in Africa. What's the right thing Ghana is doing concerning their oil?
I believe they've learned their lessons, from especially Nigeria.
Okay.
The way, we started, we were too probably naive in signing those contracts.
Right.
So I think they've learned from that. Because the way it's structured is the fact that the Ghanaians have a say in what goes on in their oil industry. And I think, they've also made it a point of duty that whatever they get from oil is plowed back. I think it's done in such a way that whatever they get in oil is plowed back into the community and into the country before it even gets out to the oil majors.
But are Ghanaians happy about that?
Well, because they've not started feeling it, because they've not prospected oil in a large quantity like we have in Nigeria. So it's seeping in gradually. The economy has not absorbed what they are making from oil at the moment, but they have very high hopes that they will be a major oil producing country in years to come.
All right, let's talk about press freedom in Ghana.
Okay.
That's your
that's my forte.
that's your area.
Yes.
Now, how would you rate the press freedom in Ghana?
It's the Ghanaian media is very powerful. Actually, it's very, very powerful, and I think if I want to compare the media in Nigeria and the media in Ghana, the press in Ghana, it's when I say press now, I mean the newspapers are not as strong as Nigerian newspapers, but the broadcast media, the radio, the TV, the electronic media, very powerful, very, very powerful. I mean, it's in Ghana that I see morning shows. The president calls into morning shows. The ministers, they pick their phones. Hold on, we want to speak to so and so minister, and they receive the calls in so many radio stations. And then the people are so free to criticize the government. There are no hindrances, and I mean there are healthy debates going on in the broadcast media in Ghana. It's very vibrant, very, very vibrant and powerful.
It's all right, but the point there is when we talk about celebration, because they are celebrating
57 years.
1957. But what is there specifically? In what dimension do you think they should be celebrating?
I think one, they have, in terms of their political growth, they've grown politically, but economically, just like the speech by their president, it means they are still in economic dependence, and that is why his speech was focused on national unity, and then he was talking about the fact that Ghanaians should start patronizing made in Ghana goods, because I mean, if you export everything you use, then you are as well still dependent on what Fela will call Kolo mentality. They still have that, and I think the president realizes that, and it's so sad that it has taken 57 years for them to continue preaching the message of independence. Because without if you're still in mental slavery, as we are now, then it's a problem. But I think they've realized that, and that is why the president has said, look, let's consume as much cassava bread as possible.
No, but let's come back to the issue of patronizing made in the country goods, as the case may be. But if the difference is you're preaching a gospel of all of you Ghanaians patronize made in Ghana goods, but the leaders are not doing the same.
Yes.
How do you think they're going to follow that?
That's the irony of it all. I'd expect, for example, although to be fair to the president, in Ghana, every Friday they have what they call the Friday wear. Every Ghanaian try to dress in their traditional outfit, either Ankara.
To the offices?
Yes, to the offices.
Oh,
to the offices. Nice. So at least that keeps the tailors working. That keeps the textile industry vibrant and working. And the president also follows suit by wearing those things. Even at official functions, he hardly wears suits and ties and stuff like that. So he tries that, but it's still not, reached the level where everyone will say, look, the president has shifted completely from dressing. If you decide and say, okay, look, like Yahya Jammeh, for example, you would hardly find him wearing any suit. So probably that will be a good sign that that shift has happened in Ghana. But they are trying in their own little way. Because, for example, our textile factories have just started coming up because of the ashobis that we use for
for native weddings and customary
exactly. But in Ghana, the textile industry is doing very well because of the Friday wear policy, yes, that was initiated by the Kufuor administration, and this administration had continued in the same path.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the involvement of women in activities in Ghana. Now, they talk about being a modular. Now, how involved are the women in public offices and public functions, as the case?
I think in public offices they've done well. I think the last time I was in Ghana, there was a huge debate. They've done at least they've moved up to about 32%. They've done about 32% in their house in the Ghanaian Assembly. But I think there's still work to be done in terms of gender equality in the main ministers and the main government. There's still work to be done.
All right. Now let's come to the issue of corruption, which is very prominent in the African continent.
Exactly.
But how you've been in Ghana?
Yes.
You've seen their police, you've seen their judicial system, you've seen their press, journalists, and so on, government officials, and so on. But how corrupt do you think corruption is in Ghana?
I want to give you an example.
Okay.
Because of the amounts that fly around in Nigeria, when I get to Ghana and they quarrel over certain amounts, I'm like, what are you guys talking about? We had this interview with the former president, J.J. Rawlings, in my magazine, and he was telling us about the fact that he bought a 10-year-old Jaguar when he left government, and it became a very big story in Ghana. And I was like, what's the big deal about a 10-year-old Jaguar? And a Ghanaian told me that in Ghana, a 10-year-old Jaguar, it's a big deal, and that is why they are making so. Corruption, fine, it's not eliminated, but it's very minimal. And they are trying as much as possible to fight it. If you read the papers, they are always on the case. But this present government, when your correspondent was talking about youth in government, they have so many youth in government in Ghana. And maybe because of their exuberance, they believe, the establishment believe that they are making so many mistakes. And that has led to the situation we have in the economy. The government has constantly been, harassed and pummeled for mistakes made by ministers and deputy ministers.
Exactly. That brings us to the issue of WikiLeaks. It was very prominent in the country at that time. But let me ask you, do you think that issue was blown out of proportion or it was handled rightly?
Yeah, it wasn't blown out of proportion. That is a typical Ghanaian for you. Okay. Even if the lady wasn't talking about making millions of dollars,
exactly,
and he was just talking about making hundreds of dollars, it would have still been a big issue. Like I told you, in Ghana, everything is politics. If you are NDC and you made that kind of mistake, it would have been a big issue. And so this was a lady, the same minister. Actually, I think why the case had that, why it was so blown out of proportion, was I think 1 month before then, she was also recorded chastising a staff of hers at a public function, and she didn't know that the usual tape was on, and she was chastising the staff, and it was in public, and it was a big issue. So that's why that case, the WikiLeaks thing was so big.
It looks like they were getting back at her.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, okay, so you thought you were the straight one, or you were the very prim and proper one. Now we've seen your true picture. So that was how that case was very, very well reported in Ghana.
But how did the citizens take that issue?
No, but,
how did they absorb it? How did they approach it?
Well, it just shows that they said the fact that the president and one thing that happened was that the president took a very drastic action. Immediately the story came out. He didn't waste time to set up 4 or 5 committees and do some white papers. She was made to step down almost immediately. While she had to resign her position almost immediately. And that was a strong message by the government that they won't condone such action.
All right. Now, let me ask you a personal question
Yes.
as we round off now. You have worked in Nigeria, lived in Nigeria, you have worked in Ghana, lived in Ghana, as the case to be. If the government of Ghana say, Michael wants you to naturalize to become the Ghanaian.
Lie.
Well, why not?
No, I don't think it would. I wouldn't even think about it.
Oh,
I'll just
really?
say with blunt no. I can never be from any other country apart from Nigeria. Nigeria is
It's
too
all right.
vibrant, too interesting.
Thank you
too
very
sweet
much.
to be giving up for any other country.
Wonderful, Mike. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you very much.
All right, and we apologize we couldn't have Charles Joanna on the program. We couldn't connect to him in Accra. But however, although Ghana is often seen as a model for political and economic reform in Africa, the country's political rivalry, corruption issues and labor disputes are a reminder of the challenges facing the African continent. And many say the traditional way of doing things have kept most nations as babies for over 50 years. So as Ghana celebrates 57 years of independence, this is another opportunity for African leaders to move the continent to the next level and make our freedom count. That's our show for today. You can also watch episodes of the show on youtube.com/TVC Africa Today. And until we come your way again, I am Mike Okwoche. And remember, this is Africa. Bye for now.